This episode of The Startup Life is sponsored by SaveTheChildren.org. Startup Nation, Save the Children believes every child deserves a future. In the United States and around the world, they work every day to give children a healthy start in life, the opportunity to learn, and protection from harm. They deliver lasting results for millions of children, including those hardest to reach. They do whatever it takes for children every day, and in times of crisis, transforming their lives and the future we share. Startup Nation, right now, the coronavirus is the biggest global health crisis in our lifetime. It threatens children in every way. COVID-19 has already left many children without caregivers, out of school, and exposed to violence and exploitation. Child poverty is rising. With your support, we can help children in unsafe households and help support distance learning in the face of school closures. Here are some ways your support can make a difference. For just $5, you can buy a baby's first book, providing comfort and inspiring lifelong learning. And for $25, you can serve a nutritious breakfast and lunch to 5 out-of-school children in need. And there's many other ways you can help support Startup Nation. So go to SaveTheChildren.org/SaveKids or www.savethechildren.org/SaveKids. So if you're ready to make a difference, Startup Nation, remember SaveTheChildren.org. Make the change for children. This episode of The Startup Life is tucked in nice and tight by Philip Stein and the Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet. Startup Nation, getting quality sleep is super important, especially for those of us as entrepreneurs. I know for me, if I don't get enough quality sleep, not only do I not perform well while working in my business or exercising, but also it really affects my mental health, and that doubt starts to creep in. And that's the last thing we want as entrepreneurs. Also, with everything going on, good quality sleep is important to repair the body and support a good immune system. And that is why, Startup Nation, I wear the Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet. The Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet uses natural frequency technology to reinforce our biomagnetic field to improve deep sleep, length of sleep, and overall sleep quality. This helps produce a healthier heart, regulate weight control, and help strengthen the immune system, which helps destroy bacteria and viruses. Right now, when you go to philipstein.com, use code SLEEPEZ and you will get 10% off the entire store. That's promo code SLEEP, capital E, capital Z. So if you are ready to be more productive in leading your business, go with the Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet, proven to be natural and safe to give you a better, deeper sleep. Payoff.com sponsors this episode of The Startup Life. Startup Nation, you've tried balance transfers and budgeting, but high interest rates and unrelenting bill cycles make it almost impossible to get out of credit card debt on your own. Instead of another new savings technique, you need a clear path out of debt. And that's what a payoff loan can do. A payoff loan is a personal loan backed by member-centric credit unions designed to help you pay off your credit cards. With rates as low as 5.99% APR and loan amounts up to $35,000 with no hidden fees and personal customer service support from Payoff to help you reach your financial goals. Some of the benefits of a payoff loan may also include a personal credit score boost, 1 monthly payment, and savings from lower interest rates. Go to payoff.com/the startup life to learn more. Checking loan rates won't affect your credit score. And if you listen to the replay on the podcast, the link is there in the show notes. Try something new. Pay off your credit card debt with Payoff. NMLS ID number 1396805. Now, all applicants may qualify. Loans only available within the United States. Loan is not available in all states. Payoff works with lending partners who originate the loans. Additional terms, conditions, and eligibility requirements may apply. More information is available at payoff.com/the startup life.
It's time to be about that life. The Startup Life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. And you know, Startup Nation, with everything going on, look, I know it sounds like a broken record here when you're talking about COVID-19 and coronavirus, but that's kind of affecting all of us right now. But going back to what I was saying, as we engage and we start to kind of reopen the economy and go back to work, you know, culture and team building are super important, probably more important than ever, seeing as that we're going into a crisis and stuff like that. And so how to navigate that is going to be very challenging, but we have a perfect guest for you on the show to kind of help us navigate that. She is a talent and organizational development advisor, coach, strategist, consultant, facilitator to fast-growing companies. She has worked with Walt Disney Studios, the PGA, Pixar, and more. And she is also the founder of Daimler Partners. She is the one and only Melissa Daimler. MD, how's it going?
Wow, that was a great intro. Thank you.
I tried my
going
best.
Well.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Are you ready to pour some knowledge into Startup Nation today?
I am. I'm excited to talk with you.
All righty, let's do it. So first thing first, just kind of share with us your origin story, your background. How did you get to this point in your career?
Yeah, there's always the short version and the long version. So
Sure.
I'll try to give you the in-between version.
That works.
I would say that, if I look at my career, one of the main themes that has always been there is this very curious nature about how things connect.
Absolutely.
How do you look at the greater system? And, way back in college, I studied psychology, and I did a couple of internships working with individuals at a women's resource center. And I worked at a hospital with some diabetes patients. And I always was asking questions around, how did we get here? How do we make sure that we can get underneath some of these issues and look at the more systemic issue? How do we make sure that you don't ever get diabetes? How do we make sure that, these women never get put in this kind of situation again? And
Right.
what are the different ways and levers that we can, kind of help our greater system so that these individuals don't get to where they are today? And so I've always had this passion to, help those individuals, certainly, but have realized that how we're going to help them is if we're also not just focused on their own kind of individual development and growth, but the, kind of organizational or systems perspective
Gotcha.
that plays into that. And so I think that has always driven me to have more of an organizational development perspective. I was one of, before everybody else in the world became a coach, I was
Right.
an executive coach.
Right.
And even, back then I started, as I talked to CEOs and executives, there again found that we were talking about their issues and things that were getting in their way, and also trying to figure out what other levers they could take advantage of in the system or get help from,
Gotcha.
So usually it wasn't just about that individual person, but, how are you doing on your team? How is the team supporting you or not supporting you? How are you communicating? What are the processes you have in place in your organization? And how is that helping or hurting you? So there was always this kind of balance or integration, if you will, between this individual and organizational development. And my career has been, I've been lucky, to work at some really fantastic companies. I cut my teeth in HR at Adobe, and really am grateful for that experience, and was able to, be an HR business partner for just about every function there. So
Right.
understood kind of what it was to be on the front lines with the leaders, and not so much as push things out to them and push initiatives or push trainings, but really ask questions around, what problems are you trying to solve? What do you need in your business, and how can we help from, a people and systems perspective?
For sure. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because I imagine being very good at HR and what you do, and you hit this on the head really about asking those great questions and listening. Kind of, if you don't mind me asking a quick follow-up, talk about the importance of those two things, asking those good questions and listening, as opposed to these are the policies and procedures. This is what you're supposed to do. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. It's funny, I get asked a lot, like, what are the skills that you think makes a good leader? What are some of the skills we should be thinking about in our organizations now? And one of those skills, I believe, is coaching. And coaching really is, as you said, all about asking good questions and listening. And so, I think often a lot of, myself included, a lot of what we think is the issue isn't. So, a lot of leaders, especially when I worked inside at companies, would come to me and say, oh gosh, I think it's a communication problem. Or, gosh, I'm not managing my time well. And if you take the time to ask those questions, you can get underneath and probably realize that it's not really a communication issue. It's some other, something else is going on. It could be a team dynamic. It could be maybe somebody's just nervous talking with you. It could be a number of different things, but being willing to ask questions and then listening, not to say something, but to actually listen to what that person has to say actively is such an important skill. And so often, especially in these fast growing companies, you have so many first time managers who have been rewarded really their entire careers so far in having the answer. Gotcha. And they are so afraid to, when we talk about coaching and the importance of asking questions, they get nervous and say, the reason I'm in this management role is because I am the expert. I should have the answer. And they, and then we have them go practice and come back, and they're always shocked at how different those conversations are when they not only asked the question, but they listened. And, it was fascinating to me that, so many times they would say they had a better answer than me. Like when I've had this situation before, I don't think I handled it as well as they did. And I was just able to support them as a manager in asking the kind of questions that they weren't asking themselves. So I think it is a skill that, continues to be something that I'll work on for the rest of my life. And I think so many companies and leaders realize that it's a skill that is needed, especially now, with what's going on in the world. I think we none of us know the answers. None of us. We are all making this up. This is a playbook that has never been written.
This is definitely uncharted territory for sure.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing. It's like I think people and leaders especially think that they shouldn't go out and communicate unless they have the answer, and that's just not true. And you can't exist now if you have that kind of attitude. And so, asking questions and learning from other companies and learning from other leaders and trying to kind of figure this out together is, such a great context for what we're talking about in terms of asking questions.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to ask a follow-up, but I don't want to ask just yet because I think we're going to get into the meat of the conversation as far as what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. So I'm going to circle back to what I was going to ask about that, because you talked about how leaders are, kind of seen as, want to be seen as experts, but now we're in a point where, nobody has answers. So I'm going to circle back to that. So before we kind of dive into everything else, kind of share with us, what's your new normal been, Melissa? How, from working, from your personal life, how has, what we're experiencing right now kind of change things that you've been experiencing?
Yeah. So I'm in San Francisco.
Right.
So, we've definitely been on lockdown. I don't even know what day it is. I think we're on day 56 or, I have friends who are counting.
I was going to ask, you don't have the tick marks on the wall or anything like that?
No,
Okay.
no. And I'm, and I know a lot of people say this. I'm one of the lucky ones.
Gotcha,
My husband and I are both working at home, and he has as a business that is still churning along. And I think the conversations have shifted in my own business. I mean, I think I definitely in the last couple of months have been talking with more leaders around what all the different scenarios that they could do. Where do we cut costs? What's our runway? How do we not do a layoff? If we're doing a layoff, which a couple of my clients unfortunately had to, how do we do that in the most humane way? Consistent with our values. How do we make sure that we, have dignity and respect when we're thinking about our employees? Because this is unlike 2008. It's unlike 9/11.
Right.
It's unlike anything I've ever experienced, because it's this health crisis on top of an economic crisis.
Right.
And many people who are being laid off now may not be able to get a job for a long time. And so how do we think through what that looks like? How much severance can we give? Can we give extended benefits? So conversations have shifted a little bit around that. I would say that, I thought some of the culture work that I was doing, that I know we're going to get into, was going to be on pause. But in fact, a lot of the CEOs, even this week that I've talked to, have said, I can't think of a better time to be focused on this, because it's actually the one thing we can control.
Right.
And we want to just be ahead of that and be able to be more intentional in driving that, and in leading how we're working, not just what we're focused on.
I hear that.
So lots more there. I mean, I think from a personal level, again, feel very lucky. I mean, I'm definitely exploring online workouts like I never have before.
Okay. Okay. How's that going?
Who knew that world was so big?
Right. Oh, yeah. When you talk about the Peloton and the beach body and all that great stuff. Absolutely. Yeah.
Peloton has amazing classes, daily burn,
right.
asana yoga. So yeah, I think I'm working out more than I have in a long time.
Peloton, you can send that check to 133. No, I'm just playing. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. And just, I'm coaching a lot of my clients on this,
Sure.
and I'm getting a lot of support from my colleagues and friends too. I think there are days where it just feels heavy,
Gotcha.
and I'm not as focused, and I'm doing a lot more writing. I'm doing fun things like this with you. But there are days where it's hard to concentrate. And I have a mom who's in an assisted living home. So, able to kind of Zoom with her a few times a week. But, my brother and sister and I are all concerned,
Sure.
that,
absolutely.
that they're doing everything they can. So, great support system, and trying to give myself a little bit of a break and in lowering the expectations, which is what I'm coaching a lot of people on right now. It's just, it's heavy, and I don't think we're able to be as productive as we were before, nor should we expect ourselves to be.
For sure. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're absolutely right. There are many people with this, coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, like they're having that mental block because of this, where they have, there's all this other stuff that, that just kind of comes to the forefront that not necessarily you took for granted, but you just kind of didn't really think about, like, oh my, I didn't really think about that part. So quick follow-up, because when you talk about working through that part and trying to still be productive, how do you work through that part, you personally? Like, what do you do? Are there like a reset that you do? And if it is, like, what does that look like? So, because I know a lot of people in Startup Nation are going through that same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think Zoom burnout is real.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think there's been a lot of conversations recently on, kind of video and Zoom. And one of the things I know I'm doing, and a lot of leaders are doing as well, is really thinking through, does every conversation have to be video? Can we do a walk and talk and walk outside?
Fair
Or do we, I think people are kind of rethinking their days. I do try to stagger my day in between. I have learned the hard way not to have back-to-back meetings. I wrote a piece on this when I was at Twitter, and
right.
I used to think that it was a sign of being really important when I was busy. And in fact, I think it was more of a sign that I don't have my stuff together.
Fair enough.
I'm more frenzied. We have I remember one of our leaders at Twitter, he made sure to have, a couple of hours a day just on kind of forward thinking time, strategic time, space. And you could tell, he was more grounded. He did listen to you when you were in meetings. He wasn't, he made sure people weren't on email whenever they had a team meeting. So I think the design of our days is really important, and making sure that, we're not expecting ourselves to maybe be as productive as we did before all of this, putting in some time to connect with people just informally, friends, family, doing whatever you can from a mental health standpoint. I'm a big fan of meditation. I use Calm, the app, in the morning. I'm sometimes using it now in the afternoon. But just, doing whatever you can in the morning to ground yourself and, set up your day. So, mental and physical fitness for me has always been huge. So I think doubling down on that is good. And sleeping, I know a lot of people who just are not sleeping right now because they have anxiety about the future. And so I think that's an important component as
Absolutely.
well. But yeah, there's a whole number of things that I could talk about in terms of burnout and the redesign of your days. I think a lot of companies, I don't know if you saw, but Twitter just announced yesterday that they're forever going to allow employees to work from home if they want to.
I did see that. Yes, I was actually going to ask you about that a little bit later, but yes, I did see that.
Okay.
Sure.
Should we wait?
No. It's all good. Go ahead and dive into it. I'm following you. You go right ahead.
Okay. My whole thing with what's happening now is I think it's similar to what we did in the learning space years ago with e-learning. I think
Gotcha.
We went from one extreme to another where we had everybody kind of have these live training experiences in person. And then we went, 180 to the other side of, oh my gosh, this virtual thing is pretty cool. Like,
right.
Online e-learning, let's do it. Anybody in the world. And then we realized, actually the in-person experiences have this kind of connection that you can't have over video even. And so how do we have more of this blended approach? And I think, that's what I'm coaching a lot of companies on now is they're thinking about return. I'll say return to office, because I think it's not return to work because we're all working our butts off. But, what kind of, it's more of this intention, again, going back to questions, more of this intentional design. When people are in the office, what kind of meetings should we be having? Should we have certain days where team meetings happen? If there are in-person experiences that help companies connect from a cultural standpoint, like the all hands meeting, do we want some people in the office for that? Or is it okay for some people to work from home? And so I think we are conflating a little bit, working from home with flexibility. And I know a lot of people are liking the flexibility. They're not necessarily liking the idea of working from home all the time. They're actually missing some of those components at work. And I have, many clients and friends who are also trying to be teachers to their kids and, managing that whole component as well. And so there's just a lot of complexity that, we didn't appreciate about working from home that I think people are dealing with right now.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that for sure. So, I want to ask you this in regard to the, Jack Dorsey announcing what he announced with Twitter employees and stuff like that. How do you maintain that culture, with, people working from home, and permanently or wherever the case may be? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to, my whole definition of culture.
Okay.
I think that for so long we have defined culture as this kind of soft thing that happens over time, or it's something that, it's what people do when the manager is not in the room,
right?
Or it's the perks, it's the cereal, it's the hint water. And I don't believe that. I think that if you're defining an intentional culture, there are ways to operationalize it on a daily basis, just like you would with your strategy. I think it's a combination of defining your values, and then what are the behaviors that are exemplifying those values, and then what are all the people, processes, and the practices that you can embed those behaviors into. So everything from how you hire and interview, to how you give feedback, to how you promote people, to how you recognize people.
Right.
And, from a practice standpoint, those are things like meetings and how you make decisions and how you communicate. So I think if we're talking about that kind of definition of culture, what you can work from anywhere, if it's clear of, what kind of behaviors, if you will, that we're expecting from everybody, you can express those behaviors and see how those behaviors are showing up in the processes and practices. Again, whether you're working from home or from an office. And then, I would say, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do you almost replicate those informal kind of meetings, like the times you meet people in the kitchen or in the hallway, or, you can't have a happy hour anymore in person. So
right.
do you do a virtual happy hour? I know some companies are setting up, kind of random lunches,
Right.
Let's all eat together. Everything doesn't have to be a meeting.
Right.
But again, I think we just, again, have to be careful of that too, because there was a report I just read recently where people are spending about 20% more time working because so many companies are wanting to bring people together in these Zoom meetings more than usual.
Gotcha.
Whether it's formal meetings or these informal kind of meetings. And people are just feeling the impact of that. One of my clients said, she sits her butt down at 7 a.m. and then before she knows it, it's 8 o'clock at night. She's doing some
right.
personal things in between, but it's nonstop.
Gotcha.
So that was a long answer.
For sure. No. It's a long answer, but it's an important one, because I imagine that, it's new territory, right? For the longest times, a lot of organizations and companies were saying that, like, look, I know you would like to work from home, but right now we don't have the infrastructure in place to do that. Or I don't think we will be as productive as we are coming into the office. And so now, since we've been forced to kind of, I don't know, say experiment, but we're kind of forced to kind of do this now. I imagine that, there's a few, not necessarily hiccups, but like rough patches to kind of smooth out as we figure out how to work from home, that balance between, work and meetings and things of that nature. So that, I thought it was an interesting take that you gave.
Well, I love, Twitter, they do so many things. I'm biased, but they do a lot of things right.
Sure.
When this thing first happened, everybody was working at home. I think they gave an allowance. I think it was $1,000 per person for everybody just to get set up, so to buy whatever you need to buy at home and to accommodate for that, so there's that piece too. I mean, there's some upfront costs to make sure people have what they need. But yeah, I mean, I what's funny about all of this is
Right.
I think that a lot of what we were supposed to do from a cultural and strategic standpoint is just getting amplified, so one of my colleagues the other day, she's like, gosh, I'm getting extra clear now with my employees on what it is they're accountable for. And, I've always done that, but I'm being even more focused on that now. So there's clarity in a way that maybe I wasn't as clear before. And
Gotcha.
because you can't see people, right? And so
Right.
you can't just pop in to their, by their desk or into their office. And so we always have said, right? Like best practice is you lay out a strategy, you have quarterly goals, you check in on those goals on a weekly basis. But I think, again, now all of those practices that we know serve us well in having us be more productive and effective. You have to do that now.
Right.
Even more so. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. So now I want to circle back to that follow-up question, because now we're kind of in the thick of, COVID-19, our conversation and how to discuss, navigate all this. So, you were saying earlier about how we don't know all the answer. We're just kind of in uncharted territory. This literally looks like it comes under the script from a movie, right? How we're trying to navigate this, right?
Yeah.
So as a leader, once again, we're talking to Melissa Daimler, the founder of Daimler Partners. As a leader and executive coach, how do you navigate this new normal without having all the answers?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm seeing, which I'm loving, is a lot of leaders are leveraging each other. So there's a group I'm part of here where it's a number of HR leaders who it's about 100 of them, and they're online, emailing, coming together for different events and just asking questions. When are you going back to the office? What are you thinking about? What are some of the safety mechanisms that you're putting in place? How are you reconfiguring the office? What are you doing with your security team, your workplace team?
Right.
So I think people are leveraging more of their community than I've ever seen before. There's not this, and in Silicon Valley and in a lot of high tech, there's not a lot of this anyway. I think I've always experienced people being open, and I've always been open about best practices. Here's what worked for us, but
right.
I'm seeing it even more so now. So that's been just really almost moving, to see. Even the rifts that have happened, we've had not so good ones happen here, and people who have shown up on Zoom calls thinking that it was an all hands meeting and told that it was a 100-person call and being told that they were being laid off. It's just not the way to do it.
Right.
And so, what are some best practices? What are some communication timelines? What are some talking points that you had for your layoff that I can now leverage to make sure we're also taking care of our employees? So just a lot more kind of community orientation that is happening. And I would say even at an executive level,
right.
Some of the CEOs that I'm working with are reaching out to colleagues and their fellow CEOs in ways that I've never seen before, asking questions and kind of thinking through how they would work through situations. So I think that's a lot of it. But I think first and foremost, everybody's just trying to figure out how we follow whatever is mandated, and safe by state. And then, after the safety piece is kind of done and we have that foundation in place, asking the employees too. So going back to questions, there's a lot of surveys that are being done within companies now just on, hey, how's it going? What do you need? Are we communicating enough? If we did go back to the office, what are you most concerned about? Even employees who are feeling okay about going back to the office, but not necessarily feeling okay about public transportation that they need to take in order to get to the office.
Gotcha.
So companies are thinking through that too, like, okay, do we need to have an allowance to have a car pick them up? And what does that look like? Are they going back to the days that when we want them to be at work for certain reasons? Can we coordinate that with other teams? Right. So, I think there's leader to leader conversations going on. And then there's leaders with the employees themselves. We don't have the answers. What do you guys need? And again, it's, this is a practice that has been around for a long time. And the companies that have the good cultures have been doing this for a long time. And I think the ones that haven't been listening as much and asking the questions are starting to realize that, they don't have to have all the answers. And in fact, they can just ask their employees and, they can figure out kind of a win-win plan together.
All right, Startup Nation. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. This episode of The Startup Life is tucked in nice and tight by Philip Stein and the Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet. Startup Nation, getting quality sleep is super important, especially for those of us as entrepreneurs. I know for me, if I don't get enough quality sleep, not only do I not perform well while working in my business or exercising, but also it really affects my mental health, and that doubt starts to creep in. And that's the last thing we want as entrepreneurs. Also, with everything going on, good quality sleep is important to repair the body and support a good immune system. And that is why, Startup Nation, I wear the Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet. The Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet uses natural frequency technology to reinforce our biomagnetic field to improve deep sleep, length of sleep, and overall sleep quality. This helps produce a healthier heart, regulate weight control, and help strengthen the immune system, which helps destroy bacteria and viruses. Right now, when you go to philipstein.com, use code SLEEPEZ, and you will get 10% off the entire store. That's promo code SLEEP, capital E, capital Z. So if you are ready to be more productive in leading your business, go with the Philip Stein Sleep Bracelet, proven to be natural and safe to give you a better, deeper sleep. Support for The Startup Life is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Startup Nation, personal grooming is super important, not only from a hygiene standpoint, but also from a confidence one as well. And that is why you need to have a tight haircut and, well, a nice groomed undercarriage as well. And when doing that, you don't want to use the same razor, do you? That's just absurd. And this is why our friends at Manscaped have given you another option. Introducing the all-new Lawnmower 3.0 by Manscaped. This lightweight and waterproof razor features precision engineered blades for safe trimming in sensitive areas, and a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology. Ladies, Father's Day is just around the corner, and this will make a perfect gift for that guy on the go. Use code The Startup Life in all caps for 20% off and free shipping on your brand new Lawnmower 3.0 at manscaped.com. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. And while you're there, be sure to check out all the other products from manscaped.com as well. So for proper manscaping without the fear of hurting anything, go with Manscaped. Trust me, your family of jewels will thank you. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. I want to ask you this. Once again, you're executive coach and leader. And as we start to slowly reopen the economy in certain parts of the country, we'll kind of dive into that a little bit later. But as we start to reopen the economies in certain parts of the country, for instance, I'm here in the Memphis metropolitan area, so I'm in a tri-state area. We have Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas, right? So a lot of places are reopening, and I want to ask you this. Let's say I have an employee, and we're talking about our essential workers, people who actually have to go into a physical brick and mortar store or whatever case may be to actually do their work. Let's say I come back to work the first day that we reopen, right? I'm an employee there. But as we reopen, not everybody comes back at the same time, which means that's more stress on me. There's more work on me because I have to make up for whoever's not there. Let's say 2 weeks later, everybody starts to come back. So I imagine only naturally there's a little bit of resentment between the people who were there day one and the people who are there 2 weeks later. As a leader, how do you manage like that kind of, dynamic, if you will, where you have people who are, maybe there's a little bit of bickering, there's a little bit of a little shade thrown here and there in meetings and stuff like that. As a leader of a brick and mortar store like that, what's the approach there? Because I imagine some people are kind of going through that right now.
Yeah. I mean, are you talking about, some people get to still work from home while other people have to go into the office?
So let's say and I'm just going to give a real world example here. Let's say I work at a grocery store and I go back day one, right? Day one, I'm back there, stocking, cashiering, whatever it is that I do, right? And let's say there was somebody who was, who didn't want to come back to work just then, right? And they don't come back until 2 weeks later. And so now the person who comes back 2 weeks later, the person who was there day one, it has a little bit of resentment towards the person who comes back 2 weeks later. And so as a leader, you have to kind of manage that. So I guess I'm curious, what are some of those strategies look like? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think, if you come to work, you're getting paid, right? Hopefully.
For sure. Right.
So obviously, they're getting a paycheck and getting money there.
Right.
I think one of the leaders' jobs right now is to provide context as much as possible.
Gotcha.
And I think that's always important, but just to remind people that, and even set that whole situation up that, hey, I'm aware that you're coming in right now. Some of your teammates are coming in a couple of weeks later because they have circumstances that, don't allow them to come in now. But here's what I'm going to do for you. Besides pay you, I don't know if there's an additional bonus or if there's some kind of recognition that can be done on top of that. But I think oftentimes why there is stress on a team or there's dynamics that aren't so positive,
right,
is because there's a lot of assumptions that are made and people aren't clear or think it's fair that somebody else gets this and I only get this. And, I think if a leader can be really clear about, look, here's how I'm going about thinking this back to store, back to office plan, it's going to be staggered. Here's why. I'm not having everybody come back at once because I don't think that's safe for anybody. Here's why I picked you to come at this time. Here's why so it's treating them like adults, and that there is a context and a reason that we're doing this. Hopefully you have a reason for that. And over communicating, because we all know when you don't communicate and you don't give that context, people make stuff up. It's usually a lot. It's usually a lot worse than what the reality is. I think people want to be brought along to to and with your decision making process and treated like adults and treated like they're part of the solution.
Absolutely.
even if you said in that case, like, here's what I'm thinking, I think it should be staggered. I think, it sounds like you can go back here. Does that make sense? Is there anything that
Fair enough.
doesn't work for you in that? Do you want a shorter shift, or should I be thinking some people should come back sooner, but maybe we all have shorter shifts. I don't know,
Right.
So.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. But that part you talked about, that buy-in, being part of the solution, I think that's super important, because I think a lot of times, and you're so right, if they don't feel part of the solution, they kind of fill in those gaps, fill in that story themselves, and it's nowhere near the actual truth a lot of times, right? So, I definitely appreciate you sharing that for sure. So we were talking earlier about how, I'm here in the Memphis metropolitan area. You're there in San Francisco and California. And clearly, both of our states have different approaches to how we're reopening the economy and stuff like that. I know California has decided to kind of, stick with the stay-at-home measure as opposed to Tennessee here. We're kind of slowly into phase one of reopening and stuff like that. And so I'm curious about this, and this is just strictly from a culture standpoint, not to get any social issues or political, things or whatever case may be.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to your commentary on, do you think as we navigate this COVID-19 reopening economy, does the United States as a self have a culture problem as it relates to how we're reopening? Because like I said, California and Washington State are doing one thing, here in the South and Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, we're doing something a little bit different. So do we have a culture issue as we relate to COVID-19?
My gosh. I don't know how we can't get into politics with this.
Now, you can be as frank as possible. That's my role. Like, we at the show, we try to stay as apolitical, but you can be as frank as you want.
Yeah, I mean, I do. So if I look at this from an organizational standpoint,
Sure.
I think part of what makes a good culture is being clear about and consistent with how you're working. There's a consistent approach to how people get recognized, how people get feedback, how people get promoted. I feel safe because I know that person got promoted because they not only killed it on their results, what they were supposed to do, but how they did it was consistent with one of our values around being a team player. Right. And so, different than, that person got promoted. They're not as experienced as me. They didn't meet their results, or maybe they did, but how they did it was, they steamrolled people. Like, they weren't a team player. Like, that's just not consistent with, I think, what we said we're all about as a company. So I think just overall, as a general principle, the reason, I'm so biased for having these processes and practices in place consistent with your behaviors is because I think it provides this anchor and this sense of stability and safety with employees, because they understand how to navigate, how to operate. That being said, I think, within those constraints, there is this sense of freedom, because kind of what the guardrails are, and there may be a slightly different approach that an engineering function wants to take, or maybe an engineering function wants to reward other things besides what we're rewarding as an organization from a values and behavior standpoint. That's okay. I think there's some functional things that I think are great for teams to do, just based on what that team needs and what that team wants to do. So I would say the same for, if we think about what's happening across the U.S., I think it's unfortunate that we don't have a more consistent approach. Right. I think there needs to be a more consistent way that we're thinking about addressing this virus. And, there's considerations that should be made. I think the question is always, really we're over rotating on being defensive from a health perspective,
right.
and not considering how much this is damaging our economy,
Gotcha.
which is fair. But I think that those should be also planful. You know, should there be different approaches for some of the manufacturing companies? You know, Elon Musk is in the news right now with Tesla saying, you know, I'm in California, but my gosh, you know, my competitors in Michigan are opening up and I can't, you know, so, you know, there should be some kind of conversation with similar kind of industries that are happening, that, you know, like taking an approach where, you know, what are this, again, asking questions like, what are some of the safety precautions you're taking? How are you guys bringing people back to work into the factories? What have you found that has worked? And so in that case, you know, can we kind of take an approach that goes across state lines and just focus more on industry specific standards?
Gotcha.
But I think at a meta level, there should be, you know, kind of ideally a team managing kind of what should be consistent across, and then where do we make exceptions based on not just our health but our economy. But we don't have that kind of, we don't have that federal, you know, we talk a lot at an organizational level, like federal, state, even, you know, like what are kind of the federal processes and ways of working that are not going to go away, that there's, you know, we have to all follow. And then where can we be a little more flexible based on the needs of that state or that function? But there's a leadership body that's managing that, right? And we don't have a leadership body managing that right now.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing all of that. I didn't even think about that example you gave with Elon Musk and him being in California with Tesla, as opposed to the big three there in Michigan. You're absolutely right. I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right about that. Thank you for sharing all of that. For sure. Startup Nation, when you go to melissadaimler.com, you get to read a little bit more about Melissa and the work that she does at Daimler Partners. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast, where she has, you know, team building workshops, you know, for the individual, for the team, for the organization. So if that's something that you're looking into, definitely give her a shout. Once again, we have a link there in the show notes for easy access. Melissa, I was looking at your website and I saw that, you know, you have, you know, your values, right? You have health, adventure, design, and humor. I'm curious about, like, when you have your workshops, how do you, you know, kind of implement the humor part? Like, are you cracking jokes? Are they like well timed? Are they off the cuff? Like, what's your comedic style there in San Francisco?
My gosh, that's so good. I probably think I'm funnier than other people. No, I don't. You can ask anybody who's been on my team. I like a little bit of levity at work.
Okay.
I think we take ourselves too seriously. So, you know, just lightening things up and having some fun. I am such a big fan of comedians. I think they're some of the most brilliant people in this world. Yeah, like Seinfeld. Like, I just watched his special recently, and you know, he's just masterful at some of the basic skills that I think every leader should have. You know, being present, being able to kind of be in the moment and pivot really quickly in a conversation. Storyteller, like such a good storyteller. Dick Costello at Twitter, you know, our CEO there, he came from an improv background. And I just think it was such a good set of skills when, you know, he'd be talking to the company and telling stories about our customers and, you know, what we're doing as a leadership team and what he saw that week that really resonated with our values and was aligned. And so, I just think there's a lot to humor and improv and kind of having this lighter nature to ourselves as leaders and as human beings. I've taken improv classes. I've taken I started to take some comedy classes, but I think it's hard because you also have to just be really vulnerable.
Right.
And really open. And it's sometimes a scary thing to do.
For sure. And it's funny you mention that. Like when we talk about some, I know again, a little subject here, but I'm with you. I love, the comedian's brain and how they think and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right. They have to be vulnerable, and it makes you think about some of the most successful ones that unfortunately are no longer with us, like a Chris Farley, like a Robin Williams, and how vulnerable they are with certain things and stuff like that. So no, I definitely understand that. And as a fan of Brene Brown, how about, speaking about how vulnerability is your power, I definitely understand all of that of what you're saying for sure.
And she's funny.
Oh yeah, she's hilarious. She is hilarious. Talking about Netflix special, I saw hers as well. It was pretty good. Hey, Startup Nation. So today's content ran a bit over, and I don't want to get in trouble with my radio partners. So go to thestartuplifepodcast.com and catch the bonus content from today's episode. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.